Oscar Piastri heads into 2026 as a driver shaped by experience. Last season, he spent a long stretch leading the championship, only to see it slip away through a combination of team decisions, McLaren's complicated approach to fairness, race incidents, and increasing internal pressure. Damon Hill's criticism that Piastri was too nice and too obedient to the team highlights something important. What needs to change for Piastri isn't his speed, but how he positions himself in a title fight. Beyond mentality and team politics, there's also the question of car performance. McLaren are running Mercedes power units, and the ongoing talk about a regulatory loophole potentially giving Mercedes an efficiency and power advantage in real race conditions means something quite simple. If it proves true and remains legal, Piastri could be driving a slightly stronger package than some of his rivals. In Formula One, a small, consistent advantage across a season can make a huge difference in a championship battle. So with the painful lessons of 2025, the growing expectation for him to be more selfish and more assertive, and the possibility of technical support that may work in his favour, one big question emerges. Is 2026 finally going to be the season where Oscar Piastri stops being almost there and truly becomes a world champion? Stick around until the end of this video, and if you enjoy deep F1 analysis like this, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. From the outside, Piastri's 2025 season reads like a campaign that should have ended with a serious title claim. He led the standings for much of the year, he had the pace, and he had the consistency, yet somehow he finished third in the championship. Lando Norris emerged as world champion, Max Verstappen managed to split the McLarens in the final classification, and Piastri, who at one stage had control of the title fight, found himself watching someone else lift the trophy. What makes it even more interesting is that it wasn't simply a matter of being outperformed. There were identifiable moments where circumstances shifted the balance away from him. One of the recurring themes was McLaren's so-called papaya rules, the philosophy of fairness and equality between the two drivers. Internally, McLaren were proud of the idea that both Piastri and Norris would be treated equally, with no clear number one. But from the outside, it sometimes looked like equality came at a price, and that price was often paid by Piastri. The most referenced moment came at Monza, where Piastri had to give the position back to Norris after a problematic pit stop for the Briton. Damon Hill was blunt when discussing that moment. Speaking on the Drive to Win podcast, he said, "For example, Lando had a bad pit stop at Monza, and he was asked to give the place back. Wow, that's quite a big thing to do, isn't it? To give points away to a guy you could be fighting for the World Championship?" For Hill, that was symbolic of something larger. Piastri's willingness to comply, and how costly that might have been. Then there was Qatar, which Hill described as the lowest point emotionally for Piastri. Hill said, "I think he probably felt the worst he was going to feel after Qatar. I think he could not believe what had happened there." That sense of disbelief, of being on the wrong side of crucial turning points, defined the closing stages of Piastri's season. Across a few races, momentum slipped away, and when a title fight is separated by small margins, those few decisions and incidents become enormous. Hill's broader message for Piastri going into 2026 was very clear. Stop being the good soldier all the time. Hill argued that while McLaren were trying to be fair as a team, Piastri shouldn't keep sacrificing his own championship prospects. His line was effectively that Piastri needs to start thinking more selfishly, even ruthlessly. He said Piastri should go into the new season saying, "Listen, I love the team and it's been great, but I have to think of myself. It's my career. I can't afford to do that. I did it last year. That could have cost me the World Championship." Coming from a former world champion, that isn't just noise, it's a considered assessment of how titles are actually won in Formula One. Interestingly, Piastri himself hasn't taken a confrontational stance publicly. He has spoken about Norris not becoming Superman just because he won the title, stressing that he still expects fairness and equality within the team. He has acknowledged the difficult moments, the tension, and the uncomfortable phases of 2025, but he also said that both he and Norris have become better drivers because of how hard they pushed each other. He also described McLaren as giving them as fair a chance as possible to fight for a world championship, which suggests he is not walking into 2026 with resentment, but with a clearer understanding of what this kind of environment demands. However, internally, this cannot simply be business as usual. When a team has two top-level drivers and one is now a world champion, the psychological landscape inevitably shifts. Even if the official policy remains equality, status in the garage subtly evolves. Zak Brown hinted strongly that the papaya rules philosophy would continue. He praised McLaren's 2025 approach and called it something they plan to do going forward. That essentially means Piastri will probably not be handed a convenient number one status. If anything, the expectation will be that he handles Norris as an equal and still finds a way to come out on top. There's also the strategic uncertainty hanging over the season ahead. Former Alpine executive Marcin Budkowski suggested that if tension between Norris and Piastri continues, or if McLaren fail to stay competitive under the new regulations, Piastri could eventually look elsewhere. He said, "I think the Oscar camp is less happy than the Lando camp. If there's either a lack of competitiveness on McLaren's side or more in-team fighting between Oscar and Lando, then I can see Oscar looking elsewhere." That's a serious point. Piastri is contracted until at least the end of 2028, but in Formula One, contracts are only as secure as circumstances allow them to be. If 2026 becomes another season where he feels held back, the conversation about his long-term future becomes very real. But all of this sits within a much bigger technical reset. 2026 is not just another season, it is a new era of regulations. That means car concepts change, power unit architecture evolves, and competitive order can shift dramatically. McLaren, despite the risk that comes with regulation changes, appear confident. Andrea Stella spoke with notable optimism about McLaren's technical structure, emphasizing the strength of the group that developed their recent title-winning machinery. He said the standards, working methods, and technical mindset carry forward, even if the specific rules do not. That's the foundation Piastri goes into battle with. Layered onto that is the entire Mercedes power unit discussion. McLaren use Mercedes engines, and throughout the paddock there has been significant talk about a regulatory loophole potentially giving Mercedes an advantage in terms of efficiency and usable power in real race conditions. The essential idea is that their design might comply fully with testing requirements while offering improved performance when the engine is actually running in competitive conditions. The details are complex, but the implication is straightforward. If it's real, legal, and executed properly, teams using Mercedes power could benefit. For Piastri, that means the possibility of starting the new era not from a position of uncertainty, but potentially from a position of strength. If that happens, the equation for Piastri becomes fascinating. In 2025, he was good enough to fight for the title with a car that was incredibly fast but managed under a philosophy of internal equality that didn't always suit him. In 2026, if he has a similarly competitive car, maybe even with a technical advantage, but approaches situations with a more assertive mindset, the margins that cost him the title before might flip in his favour. The psychological shift is just as important as the mechanical one. There is a difference between being the talented driver sharing opportunity and being the driver who refuses to let those opportunities slip. At the same time, Norris is not disappearing. He is now a world champion. He has the authority and confidence that comes with that status, and he'll want to defend his position. Internal battles therefore become sharper. McLaren will again need to manage two drivers capable of winning races and potentially fighting for championships. That creates tension, but tension is inevitable when the stakes are this high. The interesting question is whether McLaren's commitment to fairness survives another season of pressure, and how Piastri behaves the moment fairness clashes directly with his own title ambitions. What makes 2026 compelling is that Piastri is no longer a rising talent with nothing to lose. He's a proven race winner, a genuine contender, someone who has seen how fine the margins are when fighting for a championship. He understands that titles don't just require speed and consistency. They require political sharpness, willingness to say no at the right moment, and the courage to prioritize his own campaign when it matters most. If he takes Hill's advice seriously, his attitude in key strategic moments may look very different this year. So we're left with a driver who has motivation, scars, credibility, and possibly a stronger technical platform beneath him. If the papaya rules continue, he'll need to prove he can win within that framework rather than rely on preferential treatment. If internal pressure rises, he'll need to handle it without cracking. And if the Mercedes power unit torque materializes into a real advantage, he'll need to maximize it consistently, not let chances escape like they did before. The real question is simple, but carries enormous weight. If Oscar Piastri was already close to becoming world champion under the conditions of 2025, what happens if he comes into 2026 with a tougher mentality, clearer boundaries with the team, and a car that might genuinely be among the strongest on the grid? Does this become the season where he finally takes control of his own destiny, or will the same patterns repeat with different excuses? I want to know what you think. Does 2026 belong to Piastri, to Norris again, or does someone else steal the moment entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.